They mocked the veteran's cane until a Navy SEAL shouted, "That's my commander." Can you believe that ancient relic he's leaning on? It looks like it'll turn to dust any second. One voice sneered to the other, their laughter sharp and dismissive as they eyed the veteran's cane. But their amusement was short-lived. To hear how a decorated Navy SEAL silenced their mockery and revealed the true story behind the cane, inspiring a wave of shame and respect, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and listen to the full incredible account of "They mocked the veteran's cane until a Navy SEAL shouted, 'That's my commander.' You won't want to miss it." The screech of tires tore through the afternoon, calm, a sound too harsh, too final for the idyllic setting of the Oak Haven Farmers Market. It was immediately followed by a sickening thud, not the crunch of metal on metal, but something softer, more yielding, a sound John Miller had hoped he'd left behind in the sand-choked landscapes of his past. Panic erupted. A woman's scream, sharp and piercing, sliced through the air, followed by a cacophony of shouts and gasps. John's hand, gnarled and stiff, reflexively tightened around the worn cherry wood of his cane. His eyes, faded blue but still missing nothing of consequence, scanned the chaotic scene. A child's bicycle, its front wheel bent at an impossible angle, lay a few feet from a small still form on the asphalt. A bright crimson stain was already blossoming on the concrete. He moved before thought, the years falling away, the civilian world momentarily dissolving. The tap, tap, tap of his cane was urgent, a counterpoint to the rising hysteria as he navigated the throng of frozen onlookers. He reached the boy no more than 8, his face a ghostly white. A young woman, likely the mother, knelt beside him, her cries verging on incoherent. John ignored the surrounding chaos. His focus narrowed, his training buried deep, resurfacing with an almost physical jolt. He saw the unnatural twist of the boy's lower leg, the telltale sign of a severe fracture. "Don't touch him." His voice rough with disuse, but carrying an undeniable weight of authority, cut through the noise. The crowd recoiled slightly. He knelt, the movement slow and deliberate, his old wounds protesting as he reached into his pocket for the familiar weight of his battered multi-tool. A sudden, profound silence fell as the old man, seemingly frail, began his assessment with surprising practiced calm. John Miller's world had shrunk considerably since his days commanding SEAL teams in theaters of operation few Americans could find on a map. Now his domain was a small, neatly kept bungalow on the outskirts of Oak Haven, a quiet town that prided itself on its historical society and annual pie contest. His mornings were for tending the surprisingly resilient tomato plants in his backyard, his afternoons for dog-eared spy novels and black coffee. The transition hadn't been easy. The silence of suburban life was often more deafening than the roar of a Black Hawk helicopter. His body, a road map of past engagements, ached with a regularity that mocked his attempts at a peaceful existence. The cane, his constant companion, was more than a support for his damaged knee, a knee that had buckled under the weight of a fallen comrade Rodriguez during a firefight in the Korengal Valley. It was carved from a piece of oak salvaged from the grounds of their old training base, a tangible link to a life and a brotherhood that felt increasingly distant. He was invisible now, and mostly he preferred it. Society had a way of moving on its memory, short, its attention fleeting. The respect and authority he once wielded were relics of a former self. So when he entered the Morning Perk, Oak Haven's trendiest coffee spot, he expected nothing more than his usual a large black coffee, no sugar, and the customary anonymity. The cafe buzzed with the self-important chatter of young professionals and students hunched over glowing laptops. As John waited for his order, his gaze drifted out the window, lost in thought. The Snickers started subtly a low ripple from a nearby table occupied by three young adults impeccably dressed in what John vaguely recognized as athleisure wear. Their eyes kept flicking towards him, or more specifically, towards his cane resting against his leg. He'd learned to ignore such things. The casual dismissiveness of youth was a common annoyance. But then Liam, the pierced and tattooed barista, who always seemed to wear an air of studied nonchalance, approached his small table as John began to stir his coffee. Cool walking stick pops. Liam drawled, a smirk playing on his lips. His voice was loud enough to draw the attention of several nearby patrons. Looks like something out of a fantasy movie? You a wizard or something? Laughter, thin and condescending, followed from the nearby table. One of the young women, her hair a startling shade of electric blue, chimed in. Maybe he's here to lead us on an epic quest to the early bird special. John felt a familiar tightening in his chest. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was a weary resignation. He'd faced down men with AK-47s and a fanatic gleam in their eyes. A hipster barista and a few snide remarks were hardly a threat. He opened his mouth to offer a mild, deflecting comment, perhaps about the weather, when a new voice, sharp and resonant, sliced through the cafe's hum. "Excuse me, did I hear you correctly?" Every head in the morning perk swiveled. Standing near the counter, a tray with a steaming mug in his hand, was a man in his late 20s. He was dressed in unassuming civilian clothes, jeans and a plain gray t-shirt, but there was an unmistakable precision in his posture, a focused intensity in his eyes that brooked no argument. He set his tray down with a deliberate click and strode towards the barista and the snickering group. Liam, the barista, visibly faltered under the stranger's direct gaze. Hey man, just, having a bit of fun." Fun, the stranger's voice was dangerously soft. You think it's fun to belittle an elderly gentleman because he uses a cane. His eyes, cold and assessing, flicked to the electric blue-haired woman. "And you? What's your contribution? Jokes about early bird specials." The woman's smirk vanished, replaced by a flush of discomfort. "We were just kidding around. No offense intended." "No offense intended?" The stranger's eyebrow arched. He took another step closer, his presence suddenly filling the space. "This walking stick," he said, his voice now resonating with a barely suppressed anger. "This cane that you find so amusing represents more courage and sacrifice than any of you will likely witness in your entire lives." He then turned, his gaze falling on John, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of surprise and a dawning, reluctant recognition. The stranger's hard expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Commander Miller?" he asked, his voice suddenly laced with an astonished respect. "Is that really you?" Sir John studied the younger man's face. The sandy hair, the piercing blue eyes, the faint scar above his left eyebrow. The years rolled back. "Smith," he ventured, his own voice raspy. "Sergeant Michael Smith." A wide, relieved grin spread across Smith's face. "Yes, sir, it's me. Wow, Commander, it's an honor to see you again." He turned back to the now thoroughly cowed barista and the silent group at the table. The atmosphere in the cafe had undergone a radical transformation. The background hum of conversation had ceased. All eyes were fixed on the unfolding drama. These individuals, Smith said, his voice regaining its steely edge, were making fun of your Kane commander. They were mocking you. He gestured towards Liam. This one thought you were a wizard. John managed a faint smile. It's all right, Sergeant. No harm done, really. Just some youthful high spirits. With all due respect, sir, it is not all right. Smith stated firmly, his conviction unwavering. They have no idea who they're talking to. They have no understanding of what you've done, what you represent. He fixed his gaze on the barista. This Pops, as you so disrespectfully called him, is Commander John Miller, United States Navy SEAL. He led my team, our team, through some of the most dangerous operations this country has ever asked its warriors to undertake. That cane he leans on, he needs that cane because he took 3 rounds to the leg while dragging my sorry ass and 2 other wounded teammates out of an ambush in Afghanistan. An ambush where we were outnumbered 10-1. A collective intake of breath rippled through the cafe. Liam's face had turned a pasty white. The electric blue-haired woman stared at John, her mouth slightly agape. Smith wasn't finished. I was there, sir, he said, turning briefly to John, a flicker of shared memory in his eyes. I saw you already wounded, refused to leave Rodriguez behind when he was pinned down. You went back for him under a hail of machine gun fire. That's how you earned that limp, Commander. That's why he needs that cane. He swept his gaze across the stunned onlookers. This man has bled for this country. He has watched friends die for it. He has made sacrifices you people can't even begin to imagine. And that cane, that ancient stick, it's a testament to his bravery, his loyalty, and his refusal to leave a man behind. It's a symbol of the pain he endures every single day because of his service. He recounted a specific mission, a harrowing night raid, where Miller's calm leadership and tactical brilliance had saved the entire team from annihilation. He spoke of Miller's quiet humility, his unwavering moral compass, and the fierce loyalty he inspired in his men. As Smith spoke, the image of the frail old man with the cane transformed into something altogether different, something formidable and deeply respected. The air in the morning perk was thick with shame and a dawning, uncomfortable understanding. The silence that settled over the morning perk after Sergeant Smith's impassioned defense was profound, broken only by the distant hiss of the espresso machine. The earlier arrogance of the mockers had evaporated, replaced by expressions ranging from stunned disbelief to outright mortification. Liam, the barista, looked as though he wished the floor would swallow him whole. The group at the nearby table avoided eye contact with everyone, their faces flushed. John Miller himself felt a complex mix of emotions. Embarrassment at being the center of such a public display, a deep gratitude for Smith's unwavering loyalty, and a familiar pang of sorrow as the memories Smith had resurrected echoed in his mind. He gave a slow, deliberate nod to his former sergeant. "Thank you, Michael," he said, his voice low but clear. That was quite the testimonial. They needed to hear it. Commander Smith replied, his breathing still slightly heavy from the force of his words. People forget, or worse, they never knew. He pulled out his smartphone. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to share this. What happened here and who you are. It's important." John hesitated. His entire post-service life had been built around anonymity, around fading into the background. The thought of his story, his past, being broadcast was unsettling. He valued his privacy, the quiet shield he'd erected around himself. But looking at Smith's earnest face, seeing the conviction in his eyes, John knew this wasn't just about him. It was about all the others like him, the ones whose sacrifices went unremarked. "All right, Sergeant," he conceded with a sigh, "if you think it will do some good." Smith quickly typed out a condensed version of the events, the mockery, the confrontation, and a brief, powerful summary of Commander Miller's service and the true meaning of his cane. He took a discreet, respectful photo of John, capturing the quiet dignity that even age and injury couldn't diminish, with the cane resting faithfully beside him. He added a few carefully chosen hashtags: "Veterans Respect," "The Unsung Heroes Never Forget," and hit post. Within minutes, the digital ripples began. Smith's network of military friends and fellow veterans were the first to react, their comments a mixture of outrage at the initial disrespect and fierce pride in Commander Miller. The post was shared, then shared again, leaping from military circles into the wider civilian internet. Each share amplified the story, the stark contrast between the casual cruelty and the profound heroism, striking a chord with thousands. By the time John had slowly finished his now cold coffee, his ancient flip phone, a deliberate choice against the encroaching complexities of modern technology, began to vibrate with uncharacteristic insistence. Smith, whose own phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree, showed him the screen. The post was exploding. News aggregators were picking it up. Local bloggers were reposting it. The comment section was a torrent of support for Miller and condemnation for the coffee shop. The comfortable obscurity John had cultivated for so long was dissolving before his eyes. The incident at the Morning Perk was no longer a minor unpleasant encounter. It was the fuse that had lit a conflagration of public interest. He was no longer John Miller, the quiet retiree. He was Commander John Miller, a symbol, and his life, which had settled into a predictable, if sometimes lonely pattern, had just taken a sharp, unexpected turn. There was no going back to being invisible. The world, it seemed, was suddenly very interested in the old man with the wooden cane. The days following the coffee shop incident were a blur for John Miller. What started as a single social media post by Sergeant Smith metastasized with astonishing speed into a national news story. The tale of the mocked veteran and the loyal SEAL was irresistible. It had clear heroes and villains, a dramatic confrontation, and a deeply resonant message about respect and overlooked sacrifice. John found himself, much to his initial dismay, at the epicenter of a media storm. His quiet street was suddenly less quiet, with news vans occasionally parked at the curb and reporters attempting to solicit interviews. He declined them all at first, retreating further into his small bungalow, feeling like an animal flushed from cover. The attention felt intrusive, alien. He hadn't sought glory during his service, and he certainly didn't want it now. His peace, hard-won after years of internal and external battles, felt threatened. It was Smith, along with a handful of other men from his former SEAL team, who'd seen the story and reached out, who gently persuaded him to reconsider. Commander said, Master Chief Petty Officer Rhett Tummo, Mac McMillan, his former second-in-command, his voice gravelly over the phone. This ain't just about you anymore. It's a chance to speak for all the guys who can't, for all the ones who came home changed and got forgotten. You always knew how to lead from the front, sir. Maybe this is just a different kind of mission. Reluctantly, John agreed. He granted a few carefully selected interviews, not to television networks seeking sensationalism, but to local newspapers and veterans' publications. He spoke with quiet eloquence, not about his own deeds, but about the caliber of the men he'd served, with the bond they shared, the friends they'd lost, like Rodriguez. He talked about the importance of supporting returning service members, the challenges they faced in transitioning back to a civilian world that often didn't understand their experiences. He found to his surprise that people listened. His words, unadorned and heartfelt, carried a weight that resonated. The public response was astonishing. His mailbox, usually containing only bills and gardening catalogs, was inundated with letters. Some were from fellow veterans sharing their own stories of being misunderstood or overlooked. Many were from ordinary citizens expressing shame at the incident in the coffee shop and profound gratitude for his service. Children sent drawings of soldiers. Small donations arrived unsolicited for veterans' charities in his name. The Morning Perk, meanwhile, faced a significant public relations crisis. Online reviews plummeted, their social media pages were flooded with angry comments, and a small but persistent group of local veterans organized a peaceful daily picket outside its doors. The owner, a young entrepreneur named Jessica Chen, who had been horrified to learn about the incident from the viral post rather than her staff, reached out to John personally. She was deeply apologetic, explaining that Liam, the barista, and the instigating customers had been disciplined. She proposed a public apology and offered to host a community event to honor local veterans, with all proceeds going to a charity of John's choice. John, embodying the grace he'd always possessed, accepted her apology. He saw no value in protracted bitterness. The event was scheduled. In a further gesture of goodwill and after much community discussion, Jessica Chen announced that the Morning Perk would be officially renamed. Simultaneously, a grassroots movement began within Oak Haven. Inspired by John's story and the broader conversation it had sparked, a committee of local citizens, spearheaded by the mayor, proposed erecting a permanent tribute, not just to John Miller, but to all the town's veterans. The idea of a statue in the central town square quickly gained traction, and fundraising efforts began with unexpected fervor. John watched all this unfold with a sense of detachment, almost as if it were happening to someone else. He felt a heavy weight of responsibility. This unexpected platform, this sudden visibility, had to be used for something more than just his own story. He began spending more time at the local VFW post, not as a celebrated hero, but simply as John, listening to the stories of other veterans, offering a quiet word of support, a shared understanding. The climax of this strange, unforeseen chapter was approaching, not as a battle, but as a town and perhaps a nation looking to make amends and to remember. Veterans Appreciation Day in Oak Haven arrived with a crisp autumn clarity. The town square, usually a quiet thoroughfare, throbbed with a festive, respectful energy. Hundreds had gathered, families with small children, waving miniature flags, elderly couples, teenagers, and most notably veterans from every conflict since World War II, their service pins and medals glinting in the morning sun. The sense of community was palpable, a shared understanding that transcended the ordinary. After a series of heartfelt speeches from Mayor Thompson and representatives from various veterans organizations, the moment for the statue's unveiling arrived. A hush fell over the crowd as Sergeant Michael Smith, who had flown in for the occasion, joined Mayor Thompson and a visibly moved John Miller beside the large cloth-draped form. With a slow, deliberate pull, the covering slid away. A collective gasp, followed by a wave of applause, swept through the square. The bronze statue wasn't a heroic, idealized figure from a distant war. It was John Miller, life-sized, depicted as he was now a man etched with experience, his shoulders slightly stooped, leaning with quiet dignity on his unmistakable wooden cane. The artist had captured not just his likeness, but the resilience in his eyes, the profound weight of his journey. The cane, once an object of ridicule, was now immortalized as a symbol of his enduring strength and sacrifice. John looked at the bronze representation, then at the faces in the crowd, and a rare, gentle smile touched his lips. It wasn't just his statue, it was a tribute to every quiet battle fought, every silent scar borne. Later that afternoon, a similar sense of respectful anticipation filled the air outside the newly christened Miller's Coffee House. Jessica Chen, the owner, stood beside John. Liam, the former barista, looking profoundly humbled, was there too, having volunteered to help. John, with a steady hand, cut the ceremonial ribbon. Inside, the walls were adorned with photographs of local veterans, and a plaque near the entrance briefly recounted the story that had changed everything. The cafe was no longer just a place for coffee, it was a place of recognition. In his brief remarks at the coffee house, John, ever unassuming, deflected the personal accolades. This honor, he said, his voice firm despite his age, is not truly for me. It is for Rodriguez and for all the brave men and women who served alongside me, those who came home and those who did not. It is for every service member who has ever worn the uniform of this nation and asked for nothing in return. He spoke of the simple need for understanding and respect for communities to actively remember the sacrifices made for their freedoms. This cane, he concluded, gesturing to his own, is a reminder that some wounds are carried for a lifetime. Let this place and that statue in the square be reminders for all of us to see beyond the surface, to honor the stories, and to support those who have given so much. Life in Oak Haven gradually returned to its familiar rhythms, but with a subtle, significant shift in its heart. Miller's Coffee House became a beloved local institution, a place where veterans knew they were especially valued, and where the story of Commander Miller was quietly retold to newcomers. The statue became a focal point for reflection, a silent teacher. John Miller himself did not change. He remained humble, preferring the company of his tomato plants and his books. Yet his life had found a new, albeit unexpected purpose. He became a regular volunteer at the County Veteran Support Center, his quiet wisdom and shared experience a balm to many. He didn't seek the limelight, but when called upon, he would speak, always directing the attention away from himself and towards the broader needs of the veteran community. The viral furor eventually subsided, as all such storms do. But the ripples of John Miller's story continued to spread. It served as a potent reminder across the nation that heroes walk among us, often unseen, their sacrifices unheralded. It was a call to look closer, to listen better, and to remember that the freedoms enjoyed are often purchased at a cost borne silently by a dedicated few. And in Oak Haven, the legacy of a mocked cane, transformed into a symbol of honor, endured, a testament to the enduring power of respect and the quiet courage of the forgotten veteran.